Hey, captive hearts. Get ready for a romance where fate and danger trap two destined mates together with nowhere to run. When Pack Enforcer Zara Kane is assigned to protect the mysterious New Wolf Kai rivers in an isolated safe house, she thinks it's just another job. But the blizzard that locks them in for weeks isn't the only force bringing them together. Their wolves recognize what their human sides refuse to admit: their mates. With assassins closing in, a storm raging outside, and nothing but four walls between them and their burning attraction, Zara and Kai must face the truth. Some bonds can't be broken, no matter how hard you fight them. They can't escape each other, or the mate bond that's growing stronger every second. Chapter 1. The safe house door slammed shut with the finality of a prison cell, and Zara Kane immediately wanted out. "Well, this is cozy," she muttered, surveying the cramped cabin that would be her home for the next few days, or however long it took for the threat against her charge to pass. One main room with a kitchenette, a single bedroom, and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. She'd guarded wolves in luxury penthouses and sprawling estates, but apparently Kai Rivers raided a glorified closet in the middle of nowhere. Speaking of Kai Rivers, where the hell was he? Zara dropped her duffel bag and checked her phone. No signal, as expected. The Blackstone Pack's safe houses were chosen for their isolation, not their amenities. She moved to the window and peered through the gathering dusk at the snow beginning to fall. What had started as light flurries during their drive up the mountain was quickly becoming something more serious. The sound of an engine cut through the silence, and headlights swept across the cabin walls. Finally, Zara positioned herself by the door, hand resting on the gun at her hip. Until she confirmed it was her charge, and not whoever wanted him dead, she wasn't taking chances. The engine died, a car door slammed, and footsteps crunched through the snow. 3 quick knocks, pause, 2 more, then 1. The correct code. Zara opened the door and immediately regretted every life choice that had led her to this moment. Kai Rivers stood on the threshold like some kind of dark fairy tale prince, snowflakes dusting his black hair and the shoulders of his leather jacket. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp cheekbones and eyes so green they seemed to glow in the porch light. But it wasn't his looks that made Zara's breath catch. It was a scent. Pine and winter wind and something wild and untamed that made her wolf pace restlessly beneath her skin. Her inner beast, usually disciplined and controlled, suddenly wanted to arch into a scent like a cat seeking warmth.
No.
Absolutely not. Not happening. "You must be my babysitter," Kai said, his voice a low rumble that sent unwanted heat spiraling through her chest. He hefted a single black duffel bag and stepped past her into the cabin, close enough that she caught another lungful of that intoxicating scent. "Bodyguard," Zara corrected sharply, slamming the door harder than necessary. "And it's Zara Kane, not babysitter." Kai turned to study her with those unsettling green eyes, and she fought the urge to smooth her dark hair or check her appearance. She was here to do a job, not moon over some pretty boy who probably charmed his way out of every serious situation. "Zara Kane," he repeated, like he was testing how her name felt in his mouth. "I know that name. You're Marcus Webb's attack dog." The casual insult hit its mark, but Zara had been called worse. "I prefer problem solver. And I solve problems permanently." A smile ghosted across Kai's lips. "Good. Because whoever's hunting me doesn't seem inclined to give up easily." "About that?" Zara started, but the lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, casting eerie shadows around the cabin. Through the window, the snow was falling harder now, thick flakes swirling in the wind. "Storm must have taken out the main power grid," Zara said, moving to check the backup generator controls. "We've got maybe 6 hours on emergency power, if we're careful." "How long were you planning to keep me here?" Kai asked, sinking onto the small couch with the easy grace of a predator claiming territory. "Until the threat is neutralized." She didn't mention that intel suggested the assassins hunting him were professional enough to wait out bad weather. "A few days, maybe a week." "A week." Kai's laugh held no humor. "In this place. With you." Something in his tone made her bristle. I'm not exactly thrilled about the arrangement either, Rivers. But Webb says keep you alive, so that's what I'm going to do. Even if it means being trapped together? The way he said trapped sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows. The storm was getting worse, not better. Zara pulled out her satellite phone and tried to raise Webb. Static. She tried the emergency frequency. More static. The storm was blocking all communications. Problem? Kai asked, watching her with those unnerving eyes. We're cut off until this weather clears. She tried to keep the growing unease out of her voice. Bad weather was one thing, but being completely isolated with no backup and a man who made her wolf act like a lovesick teenager was another entirely. Kai leaned back against the couch, and the movement made his shirt ride up slightly, revealing a strip of tanned skin. Zara forced herself to look away. So we're really trapped, he said quietly. Temporarily. How temporarily? Zara looked out at the blizzard that was rapidly becoming a whiteout. The weather report had called for light snow, not this. Hard to say. Could be days. Days, Kai repeated. In a one-bedroom cabin. With no way to call for help. The bedroom's yours, Zara said quickly. I'll take the couch. That's not necessary. It's not negotiable. She needed distance between them, needed space to think clearly. Being in the same room was bad enough. Sharing a bed would be impossible. I'm here to protect you, not play house. Something flickered across Kai's expression. Hurt? Disappointment, but it was gone too quickly for her to be sure. Of course, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Strictly business. The lights flickered again, and this time they stayed off. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows that seemed to dance and shift around them. In the semi-darkness, Zara could hear every sound. Kai's breathing, the wind howling outside, the creak of the cabin settling. And underneath it all, something else. Something that sounded almost like howling, but not quite wolf. Too melodic, too haunting. Did you hear that? She asked. Kai was instantly alert, his body tense and ready for action. What? They both listened, but there was only the storm now. Probably just the wind, Zara said, but her hand drifted to her weapon anyway. Probably, Kai agreed, but he didn't relax. The cabin suddenly felt much smaller, the walls pressing in around them. Days, potentially. Days trapped in this tiny space with a man whose very presence made her feel off balance and hungry for things she couldn't name. Days with no backup, no communication, and no idea if the people hunting Kai had found their location. And underneath her professional concerns, a more primal worry. How long could she be this close to him before her iron control finally snapped? Outside, the storm raged on, and something in the darkness howled again. Chapter 2. The first night was torture. Zara lay on the narrow couch, staring at the ceiling and listening to every sound from the bedroom. Kai's breathing, deep and even. The rustle of sheets when he turned over. The soft grunt he made in his sleep that sounded far too intimate for her peace of mind. She'd faced down rogue werewolves, vampire covens, and feral shifters without breaking a sweat. But one mysterious wolf with green eyes and a scent that made her mouth water had her tied up in knots. When dawn finally crept through the windows, Zara was exhausted and on edge. She rolled off the couch, her back protesting the uncomfortable night, and padded to the kitchen to start coffee. The storm was still raging outside, if anything worse than before. Snow had drifted against the windows, creating a cocoon of white that made the cabin feel even smaller and more isolated. Morning. Kai's voice came from behind her, rough with sleep. Zara spun around and immediately regretted it. Kai stood in the bedroom doorway wearing nothing but low-slung jeans, his dark hair mussed and his chest bare. Sleep had softened the sharp edges of his face, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous. Her wolf stirred, interested, and Zara gripped the coffee mug harder than necessary. Morning, she managed, proud that her voice came out steady. Coffee, please. He moved into the kitchen, and the small space suddenly felt microscopic. When he reached past her for a mug, his arm brushed against hers, and she felt that touch like a brand. You look like hell, he observed, studying her face with those two perceptive green eyes. Thanks. You really know how to charm a woman. I'm serious. Did you sleep at all? Zara poured coffee with more force than necessary, splashing drops on the counter. I slept fine. Liar. The casual certainty in his voice made her bristle. Excuse me? You're sent, Kai said simply, accepting the mug from her hands. It's all jagged. Stressed. Like you've been awake all night thinking too hard about something. Heat flooded Zara's cheeks. She'd forgotten that enhanced senses worked both ways. If she could smell his intoxicating scent, he could probably read her emotional state like an open book. I was thinking about the job, she said stiffly. Making sure you stay alive is complicated when we're cut off from backup. Kai took a sip of coffee and studied her over the rim. Is that really what kept you awake? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Zara wasn't ready to face. Instead of answering, she moved to the window and peered out at the storm. We need to check our supplies, she said, changing the subject. This weather could keep us here longer than expected. Avoidance, Kai said quietly. Another stress scent. Stop analyzing me like I'm some kind of science experiment. Zara turned from the window, irritation flaring. I'm trying to keep us both alive. And I'm trying to understand why my bodyguard seems more afraid of me than the people who want to kill me. The accusation hit too close to home. I'm not afraid of you. No. Kai set down his coffee and moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his bare skin. Then why do you tense up every time I come near? Why did you insist on separate sleeping arrangements? Why won't you look at me directly? Because looking at you makes me want things I can't have, Zara thought desperately. Because your scent makes my wolf crazy, and I'm barely holding on to my professional composure as it is. Because I'm doing my job, she said instead. There are boundaries. Bullshit. Kai's voice was soft but implacable. I've had bodyguards before. None of them acted like I was carrying the plague. Zara backed up until she hit the counter, but Kai followed, not stopping until he was close enough that she could count his eyelashes. This close, his scent was overwhelming, pine and snow and something uniquely male that made her mouth water. What are you so afraid of? He asked quietly.
She wanted to say.
The way you make me feel. The way my wolf recognizes you as something important, something mine, when I can't afford to think of you as anything but a job. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze directly. I'm not afraid of anything. Kai's eyes searched hers, and for a moment, she thought he might call her on the lie. Then his expression shifted, becoming something darker and more dangerous. Prove it, he said. What? If you're not afraid of me, prove it. Stop running away every time we're in the same room. Stop acting like I'm going to attack you if you let your guard down for 5 seconds. I don't. Have breakfast with me, Kai interrupted. Sit at the same table, carry on a normal conversation, and stop looking like you'd rather be anywhere else in the world. It was such a simple request, but it felt like he was asking her to walk through fire. Still, her pride wouldn't let her back down from the challenge. Fine, she said. But we're talking about you. I need to understand what we're dealing with. Kai's smile was sharp-edged. Fair enough. 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other at the small table, sharing scrambled eggs and toast like a normal couple instead of a bodyguard and her charge. The domesticity of it made Zara's chest tight. So, she said, cutting into her eggs with surgical precision. Marcus Webb doesn't usually assign personal protection unless the threat is serious. Who wants you dead? Take your pick, Kai said casually. I've made a lot of enemies over the years. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Kai met her gaze steadily. I don't know who hired the assassins, Zara. If I did, this would be a lot simpler. She studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but his expression was open and honest. Either he was telling the truth, or he was a much better liar than she'd given him credit for. What kind of enemies? She pressed. The kind who don't forgive easily. Kai's smile was humorless. I used to work for people who weren't particularly concerned with ethics or legality. When I decided to change career paths, they took it poorly. What kind of work? The kind I'm not proud of. Zara set down her fork, frustration building. I can't protect you if you won't tell me what I'm protecting you from. You can protect me just fine without knowing all the gory details of my past. Kai leaned back in his chair, studying her. Unless you're having second thoughts about the assignment? I don't have second thoughts, Zara said firmly. I finish what I start. Good. Kai's voice dropped to a purr. Because I have a feeling we're going to be here for a while. As if summoned by his words, the wind picked up outside, rattling the windows with renewed fury. The storm showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. The weather service said this was supposed to be light snow, Zara muttered, moving to check the window again. Weather can be unpredictable in the mountains, Kai said, but something in his tone made her turn to look at him. You know something about this storm. It wasn't a question, and Kai didn't bother to deny it. I know that my former employers have resources most people don't, including a few witches who specialize in weather magic. Zara's blood ran cold. You think they caused this? I think it's a hell of a coincidence that a freak blizzard hit just after we arrived at a location that's supposed to be secure. Kai's expression was grim. They want us trapped here, cut off from help.
Why?
Why not just attack? Because they want something from me first. Information, probably. Or maybe they want to make sure I suffer before I die. Kai's laugh held no humor. My former boss has a twisted sense of justice. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. If Kai was right, then this wasn't just a protection job, it was a trap. And they'd walked right into it. We need to get out of here, she said, already moving toward her gear. And go where? Kai gestured toward the window. It's a whiteout. We wouldn't make it 10 feet before we froze to death. He was right, but every instinct Zara had was screaming at her to run. They were sitting ducks here, waiting for whoever was hunting Kai to make their move. Then we prepare for a siege, she said grimly, checking her weapons. How many rounds do you have? I don't carry. At her incredulous look, Kai shrugged. I prefer more natural methods of defense.
Great.
A pacifist werewolf.
Just what she needed.
Stay here, Zara ordered, heading for the door. I need to check the perimeter. Zara, wait. But she was already outside, the brutal cold hitting her like a slap. The snow was coming down so hard, she could barely see 5 feet in any direction. She forced herself to circle the cabin, looking for signs of intrusion, but the storm had already covered any tracks that might have been there. By the time she made it back inside, she was shivering uncontrollably, and her fingers were numb despite her gloves. Kai took one look at her and swore under his breath. You're hypothermic, he said, already moving toward her. We need to get you warm. I'm fine. You're blue. Kai's hands were gentle but firm as he peeled off her wet jacket. And your lips are white. Zara wanted to protest, but she was shaking too hard to form words. Kai guided her to the couch and wrapped her in a blanket, then disappeared into the bedroom. He returned with an armload of additional blankets and began layering them around her. This isn't necessary, she managed through chattering teeth. Shut up and let me help you. Kai sat beside her on the couch, close enough that she could feel his body heat. You could have died out there. I was checking for threats. In a blizzard. At night. Without backup. Kai's voice was sharp with anger. That wasn't strategic, Zara. That was reckless. She wanted to argue, but the warmth from his body was too seductive, and her defenses were down. Without thinking, she leaned into him, seeking more heat. Kai went very still. Zara? She realized what she'd done and started to pull away, but his arm came around her, holding her against his side. Stay, he said quietly. You're still too cold. It was the practical thing to do, Zara told herself. Body heat was the fastest way to combat hypothermia. This was medical necessity, not whatever her racing heart was trying to make it into. But as Kai's warmth seeped into her bones and his scent surrounded her like a protective cocoon, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. She wasn't just attracted to him. She was falling for him, hard and fast and completely against her better judgment. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Outside, something howled in the storm, closer this time, and definitely not the wind. They were no longer alone. Chapter 3. The howl came again, long and mournful, cutting through the storm like a blade. Zara was on her feet instantly, the blankets falling away as she grabbed her gun from the coffee table. The hypothermia was forgotten, adrenaline burning through her system like fire. "How many?" she asked tersely, moving to the window. Kai was beside her in an instant, his body tense and alert. "I can't tell. The storm is masking their scents." "Them? Plural?" "That wasn't a lone wolf," Kai said grimly. "That was a pack call. They're communicating." Zara cursed under her breath and checked her weapon. Full clip, one in the chamber. She had 3 more magazines in her gear, but if they were facing a pack of hostile shifters, it might not be enough. "What's our defensive position?" Kai asked, his voice calm despite the circumstances. "You don't have one," Zara said sharply. "You stay in the bedroom, away from the windows. I'll handle." Another howl, closer this time. Then another from a different direction. They were being surrounded. "Like hell I'm hiding in the bedroom while you face them alone," Kai said, moving toward the kitchen. "This is not a negotiation," Zara snapped. "I'm trained for this." "You're not." Kai turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. His eyes seemed to glow in the dim light, and when he smiled, she caught a glimpse of fangs. "You might want to rethink that assumption," he said softly. Before Zara could respond, something heavy slammed into the cabin wall, making the whole structure shake. Then another impact and another. They were testing the defenses, looking for weak points. "The windows," Zara said, moving to cover the largest one. "They'll try to come through." Glass exploded inward as a massive shape crashed through the window beside the door. Zara spun and fired twice, the bullets taking the intruder center mass. It was a wolf, but larger than any natural wolf had a right to be, with silver-gray fur and eyes that glowed amber in the darkness. The wolf staggered but didn't go down. Instead, it began to shift, bones cracking and reforming as it took human shape. A man, naked and bleeding but very much alive, grinned at her with too many teeth. "Hello, Kai," the stranger said, ignoring Zara entirely. "Miss me?" "Hello, Victor," Kai replied, his voice deadly calm. "I was hoping you'd frozen to death by now." Victor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You know me better than that. I'm too stubborn to die, especially when I have unfinished business." Another window exploded, and then another. More wolves poured into the cabin, shifting to human form as they landed. 3, 4, 5 of them, all naked and scarred and looking at Kai with murderous intent. Zara found herself caught in the middle of what was clearly a very personal confrontation, outnumbered and outgunned. But she'd been hired to keep Kai alive, and that's exactly what she intended to do. "Everyone stay calm," she said, keeping her weapon trained on Victor, who seemed to be the leader. "We can discuss this like civilized people." Victor's laugh was anything but civilized. "Oh, this is rich. Kai got himself a bodyguard. A pretty little thing, too." His gaze raked over Zara with obvious interest. "I might keep you around after we're done with him." "You're not doing anything to him," Zara said firmly. "Or to me." "Such loyalty," Victor mused. "Tell me, little wolf, do you know what your charge used to do for a living? The kinds of things he's capable of." Zara kept her gun steady, but her eyes flicked to Kai. His expression was stone, revealing nothing. "I know enough," she said. "Do you?" Victor's smile widened. "Did he tell you about the Riverside Pack? About what he did to them?" "Victor," Kai's voice was warning. "Leave her out of this." "Oh, but she's so pretty when she's confused." Victor tilted his head, studying Zara like a predator, sizing up prey. "He didn't tell you, did he? About the pack he slaughtered? Men, women, children, all of them. Burned their territory to the ground and salted the earth so nothing would ever grow there again." Zara's blood ran cold, but she didn't lower her weapon. "I don't believe you." "No." Victor gestured to his companions. "Ask Marcus here. He survived because he wasn't home that night."
Or better yet, ask Kai.
"Go ahead. Ask him if it's true." The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Zara kept her eyes on Victor, but she could feel Kai's presence behind her like a weight. "Kai," she said quietly. "It's true," Kai said, his voice barely above a whisper. The admission hit Zara like a physical blow. She'd been hired to protect a mass murderer, a child killer. There's that lovely disillusionment," Victor said, clearly enjoying himself. "Nothing quite like finding out your hero is actually a monster." "But you don't know the whole story," Kai continued, his voice stronger now. "You never did, Victor." "The whole story?" Victor snarled, his composure cracking. "The whole story is that you murdered my mate and my cubs for money. What else is there to know?" "I was hired to eliminate a rogue pack," Kai said, stepping beside Zara. "A pack that was kidnapping and torturing humans for sport. What I found when I got there wasn't what I'd been told." "Lies." "They were being controlled, Victor."
Drugged.
"Someone was using your pack as puppets, making them do things they would never have done normally." Kai's voice was steady, but Zara could hear the pain underneath. "By the time I realized what was really happening, it was too late. They were too far gone. The drugs had damaged their minds beyond repair." "So you killed them all," Victor said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "I ended their suffering," Kai said quietly. "And then I spent the next 5 years hunting down the real monsters, the ones who turned your family into weapons." The cabin fell silent except for the howling wind outside. Zara's mind raced, trying to process everything she'd heard. If Kai was telling the truth, then he wasn't a mindless killer. He was someone who'd made an impossible choice and had been living with the guilt ever since. "You expect me to believe that?" Victor asked, but his voice had lost its edge. "I expect you to listen," Kai said. He reached into his jacket slowly, and Zara tensed, but he only pulled out a thick folder. "I've been tracking the people responsible. I have names, locations, evidence. Everything you need to get real justice." Victor stared at the folder like it might bite him. Why now? Why not 5 years ago? Because 5 years ago, they would have killed me before I got close enough to gather evidence. Kai held out the folder. "I needed to disappear, to make them think I was out of the game. It was the only way to get close to the truth. And now I have what we need to destroy them completely." Kai's smile was sharp as a blade. "But I can't do it alone." Victor looked at his companions, and Zara saw doubt creeping into their expressions. Whatever hold he'd had on them was weakening. "This could be a trick," one of them said, Marcus, if Zara remembered correctly. "It could be," Kai agreed. "But what if it's not? What if there's a chance to get justice for your pack? Real justice, not just revenge." Victor stared at the folder for a long moment, then slowly reached out and took it. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, and Zara saw his expression change as he read the first page. "Son of a bitch," he breathed. "Elena Vasquez. I should have known." "She's the one who hired me," Kai said. "She told me your pack was rogue, gave me fabricated evidence, made me believe I was doing the right thing." "Where is she now?" "Dead," Kai said flatly. "I killed her 3 months ago, but she was just middle management. The real players are still out there, and they're not going to stop until everyone who knows the truth is eliminated." "Including us," Victor said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Including all of us." Kai looked around the cabin, taking in the broken windows and the wolves who'd been his enemies moments before. "That's why I'm here, why I needed protection. They know I have the evidence, and they know I'm planning to use it." Victor closed the folder and looked at Kai with something that might have been respect. "You've been planning this for 5 years. Every day since I realized what I'd done." The silence stretched between them, heavy with old pain and new possibilities. Finally, Victor nodded slowly. "What do you need from us?" "Help," Kai said simply. "There are 12 of them left, spread across 4 territories. I can't take them all alone. And if we help you, then your pack gets justice, and a lot of innocent people don't have to die." Kai's expression was grim. "But I won't lie to you, Victor. This is going to be dangerous. Some of us might not survive." Victor looked at his companions again, and Zara saw them nod one by one. Whatever these people were to each other, they were united in their need for justice. "We're in," Victor said finally. Zara lowered her weapon, feeling like she'd just watched the world shift on its axis. Everything she'd thought she knew about this situation had been wrong. Kai wasn't just a target. He was the key to bringing down something much larger and more dangerous. "So what now?" she asked. Kai turned to look at her, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "Now you have a choice to make. You were hired to protect me from them." He nodded toward Victor and his pack. "But if you stay, you'll be protecting all of us from something much worse. And if I leave, then you leave. I won't hold you to a contract based on incomplete information." Zara studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. But all she saw was honesty, and maybe a little hope. "I told you before," she said finally. "I finish what I start." Kai's smile was like sunrise after a long night. "Then we'd better get to work. We have a war to plan." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to ease, but Zara knew the real storm was just beginning. Whatever came next, there would be no going back to the simple world of bodyguard and client. They were partners now, for better or worse. And as Victor began spreading the contents of Kai's folder across the table, revealing a conspiracy that reached deeper and darker than any of them had imagined, Zara realized she wouldn't have it any other way. The hunt was on. Chapter 4. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of names, dates, and locations spread across the small cabin table like a roadmap to hell. Zara sat beside Kai, close enough that their shoulders brushed every time one of them reached for a document. She tried to ignore the way her skin tingled at each contact, tried to focus on the conspiracy unfolding before them instead of the man whose scent seemed to wrap around her like silk. "Sebastian Morozov," Victor said, tapping a photograph of a distinguished man in an expensive suit. "He runs the Eastern Territories. Has at least 6 packs under his thumb. And a taste for young wolves," added Marcus grimly. "Likes to break them personally before putting them to work." Zara's stomach churned. The more they revealed about their enemies, the sicker she felt. These weren't just criminals. They were monsters who preyed on their own kind. "What about Lydia Chen?" Kai asked, pulling out another file. "She's been quiet lately. Too quiet." "Because she's dead," said Elena, one of Victor's pack members. "Word is she tried to double-cross the wrong person 3 weeks ago. They found pieces of her scattered across 2 states. That leaves 11, Kai said, making a note on his legal pad. "But it also means they're getting paranoid. Someone's cleaning house. Which makes our job both easier and harder," Victor observed. "Fewer targets, but they'll be expecting trouble." Zara studied the faces spread across the table. Men and women who looked perfectly normal in their professional headshots, but whose files read like a catalog of horrors. Human trafficking, forced prostitution, torture, murder. The list of crimes went on and on. "How did you get all this?" she asked Kai quietly. "Very carefully," he replied, not looking up from the documents. "And at considerable personal cost." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. In the lamplight, she could see faint scars along his throat and jaw that she hadn't noticed before. There were more on his hands, she realized, thin white lines that spoke of knives and close calls. "You went undercover," she said, understanding flooding through her. Kai finally looked at her, his green eyes dark with memory. "For 2 years. Long enough to gain their trust, to get close to their operations. Long enough to document everything. That's how you got the evidence." "That's how I got some of it." Kai's smile held no warmth. "The rest I took from their private files when I killed Elena Vasquez." Victor looked up sharply. "You never said how you managed that." "Elena was paranoid as hell, never went anywhere without at least 4 bodyguards. She made an exception for someone she trusted," Kai said simply. "Someone who'd been working for her for 2 years." The implication hit the room like a physical blow. Zara felt her breath catch as she realized what Kai was saying. "You made her trust you," she said quietly. "And then you used that trust to get close enough to kill her." "Yes." The simple word hung in the air between them. Zara searched Kai's expression, looking for some sign of regret or guilt, but his face was carefully neutral. "Do you feel bad about it?" she asked. Kai considered the question for a long moment. I feel bad about a lot of things, Zara. But killing Elena Vasquez isn't one of them. There was something final in his voice, something that told her this was as much as he was willing to share. But it was enough. She was beginning to understand the man behind the carefully constructed facade, someone who'd made terrible choices and spent years trying to atone for them. All right, Victor said, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional undercurrents in the room. So we know who they are and where to find them. What's the plan? Kai leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair. That's the problem. We can't just start picking them off one by one. They'll figure out what's happening and disappear. We need to hit them all simultaneously. 12 targets across 4 territories, Marcus said skeptically. With what army? Not 12, Kai corrected. 11, remember? And we don't need an army. We need precision. He pulled out a map and spread it across the table, marking locations with red pins. Most of them will be at the Winter Gathering next week. It's an annual meeting where they divide up territories and settle disputes. Security will be tight, but it also means we can get most of our targets in one place. That's suicide, Elena said flatly. The Winter Gathering is held at the Blackwood Estate. It's a fortress. It's also predictable, Kai countered. They have the same security protocols every year, the same exits, the same blind spots. I've been to 3 of these gatherings. I know the layout. Zara studied the map, her tactical mind automatically cataloging angles of attack and escape routes. What about the ones who don't attend? Handled separately, Kai said. Small teams, coordinated strikes. We take them out the same night as the gathering, before news can spread. And after? Victor asked. What happens when the smoke clears and half the supernatural underworld is dead? Then the remaining packs are free, Kai said simply. No more forced servitude, no more trafficking, no more turning wolves into weapons. And us. Victor's voice was quiet. What happens to us? Kai met his gaze steadily. That's up to you. But you'll have your justice, and your pack will be avenged. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Finally, Victor nodded. We'll need more people, he said. My pack is good, but we're only 5 strong. This kind of operation needs at least 20. I have contacts, Kai said. Other wolves who've lost people to the organization. They'll fight if they know there's a real chance of winning. How long to set it up? 4 days. The gathering is in 6 days, so we need to move fast. Victor stood, and the other pack members followed suit. We'll make some calls, reach out to people we trust. Where should we meet tomorrow? Kai looked around the damaged cabin, taking in the broken windows and scattered glass. Not here. This place is compromised now. There's an old hunting lodge about 20 miles north of here. I'll send you coordinates. As Victor and his people prepared to leave, Zara found herself alone with Kai for the first time since the confrontation began. The silence felt different now, charged with new understanding and unspoken possibilities. So, she said finally, still think I'm your bodyguard? Kai's laugh was rueful. I think that ship sailed about 3 hours ago. Now you're something much more dangerous. Which is? My partner. The word sent a thrill through Zara that she tried to suppress. Partner implied equality, trust, shared risk. It implied a connection that went far beyond a professional contract. Is that what I am? She asked quietly. Kai turned to look at her, his green eyes intense in the lamplight. That depends. Are you still here because Webb is paying you, or because you want to be? The question hung between them like a bridge Zara could either cross or burn. She thought about her old life, the simple contracts, the clear-cut objectives, the emotional distance that kept her safe. Then she looked at Kai, at the scars and shadows that told the story of his 5-year quest for redemption, and realized she'd already made her choice. I'm here because this is where I belong, she said simply. Something shifted in Kai's expression, surprise, relief, and something warmer that made her breath catch. He reached across the space between them and touched her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against her skin. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For staying.
For believing me.
For. He trailed off, searching for words. For not running when you found out what I'd done. Zara turned her hand over, palm up, and laced their fingers together. We've all done things we're not proud of, Kai. The difference is what we do about it afterward. And what am I doing about it? Trying to make it right. She squeezed his hand gently. That has to count for something. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands linked across the table scattered with evidence of conspiracy and murder. Outside, the storm had finally broken, and pale moonlight filtered through the clouds. We should get some sleep, Kai said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Zara nodded, but neither of them moved. The moment felt too fragile to break, too precious to abandon for something as mundane as sleep. Zara, Kai said softly. Yeah, what you said earlier about not being afraid of me. What about it? Were you lying? The question caught her off guard, and she found herself really thinking about it. Was she afraid of Kai? Of the man who'd killed an entire pack, who'd spent 2 years undercover with monsters, who could end a life without apparent remorse? No, she said finally, surprised by her own certainty. I'm not afraid of you. What are you afraid of then? The question went straight to the heart of her defenses, to the careful walls she'd built around herself over years of dangerous work and painful losses. Losing control, she admitted quietly. Caring too much. Getting too close and having it all fall apart. Kai's thumb traced gentle circles over her knuckles. That's not really about me, is it? No, Zara said. It's about me. About the fact that being around you makes me want things I can't afford to want. Like what? The question was barely a whisper, but it hung in the air between them like a challenge. Zara met his gaze and saw her own desire reflected back at her, raw and honest and utterly compelling. Like this, she said, and leaned across the table to kiss him. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question asked with lips and breath. But when Kai's free hand came up to cup her cheek, when he made a soft sound of surprise and pleasure against her mouth, something inside Zara snapped. She deepened the kiss, pouring all her confusion and fear and desperate attraction into the connection between them. Kai responded with equal intensity, his hand sliding into her hair as he pulled her closer across the narrow table. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Well, Kai said, his voice rough. That's definitely a complication. Zara laughed, giddy with the release of tension she'd been carrying for days. You think. The good kind, though. Kai's smile was warm and real, free of the shadows that usually haunted his expression. Definitely the good kind. Outside, an owl called through the night, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, not in warning or threat, but in simple acknowledgement of the moon overhead. Zara looked at the evidence spread across their table, at the dangerous path they'd chosen to walk together, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. They had a war to fight, justice to seek, and probably a dozen ways they could die in the next week. But for the first time since this whole thing started, she wasn't facing it alone. And maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. Chapter 5. They didn't talk about the kiss. For 3 days, they worked side by side in the new safe house, remote hunting lodge that felt more like a war room than a romantic getaway. Maps covered every surface, weapons were cleaned and cataloged, and a steady stream of Victor's contacts came and went, each bringing news of more wolves willing to join their cause. But underneath the planning and preparation, something had fundamentally changed between them. Every accidental touch sent sparks racing through Zara's system. Every time Kai leaned close to point out something on a map, she caught his scent and had to fight the urge to bury her face in his neck. The air between them crackled with unspoken want. It was driving her slowly insane. The eastern approach has 3 guard towers, Kai was saying, marking positions on the Blackwood estate blueprint. Motion sensors between them, but there's a blind spot here. He pointed to a section of fence, his shoulder brushing against hers. Zara's breath caught, and she saw Kai's hand still for just a moment before he continued as if nothing had happened. We can get a team of 6 through there if we time it right, he finished, his voice carefully professional. What about the main house? Asked Zara. one of the new recruits Victor had brought in. Security there has to be heavier. It is.
Kai pulled out another set of plans. But I know the layout.
There's a service entrance here that leads directly to the basement level. If we can get past the electronic locks. I can handle those, interrupted Marcus. Give me 5 minutes with any system and I'll have it open. Zara tried to focus on the tactical discussion, but her attention kept drifting to Kai's hands as he gestured, remembering how those same hands had felt cupping her face, threading through her hair. The memory made her mouth go dry. Zara? Victor's voice cut through her distraction. You're awfully quiet. What do you think about the timeline? Heat flooded her cheeks as she realized she'd been caught staring. The timeline looks solid, she said quickly, hoping no one noticed how flustered she sounded. 72 hours should be enough to coordinate all the strikes. If Victor noticed her distraction, he was kind enough not to comment. But when the meeting finally broke up and the last of the recruits headed back to their temporary camps, he lingered behind. You know, he said casually, there are separate cabins available. You don't have to share quarters with Kai if it's uncomfortable. Zara felt her face flame. It's not uncomfortable. We're working. Planning. Victor's smile was knowing. Of course you are. He headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. I haven't seen Kai smile, really smile, in years. He left before Zara could formulate a response, leaving her alone with Kai in the suddenly too quiet cabin. He's not wrong, Kai said quietly, not looking up from the maps he was organizing. About the separate quarters. I can sleep in the spare room if you want. Do you want to? The question slipped out before Zara could stop it. Kai's hands stilled on the papers. Slowly, he raised his head to meet her gaze, and the heat in his green eyes made her knees weak. No, he said simply. I don't. The admission hung between them like a lit fuse. Zara knew she should be practical, should maintain professional distance until the mission was over. But the way Kai was looking at her made rational thought impossible. We have 3 days, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 days until we might die. Kai agreed, standing and moving toward her with predatory grace. That's not what I meant, isn't it? He stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. 3 days until everything changes. Until we either succeed and go our separate ways, or fail and don't have to worry about what comes next. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. You think we'll go our separate ways? After? I think, Kai said carefully, that you're used to finishing jobs and moving on. And I'm not sure I know how to be anything other than someone running from his past. What if you didn't have to run anymore? What if you didn't have to move on? They were close enough now that Zara could see gold flecks in his green eyes, could count the individual lashes that framed them. One step forward, and she'd be in his arms. One word, and this careful dance they'd been doing would finally end. Kai, she started, not sure what she wanted to say. He reached up and touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. Tell me to keep my distance and focus on the mission. Zara leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. I can't. Why not? Because I don't want you to stop. She opened her eyes and met his gaze directly. Because I haven't been able to think about anything but you for days. Because when I imagine what comes after the mission, all I see is you. Kai's pupils dilated, and she caught the faint edge of his wolf scent, wild and wanting and barely contained. Zara, he said, her name a prayer and a curse. I know it's complicated, she rushed on. I know we have jobs to finish and people depending on us. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just professional. What is it then? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Zara thought about all the careful walls she'd built around her heart, all the reasons she'd always kept her distance from clients and colleagues alike. Then she looked at Kai, really looked at him, at the man who'd spent 5 years trying to atone for one terrible day, who'd risked everything to seek justice for people he barely knew, and realized her walls had been crumbling since the moment they met. It's everything, she said simply. Something raw and desperate flashed across Kai's expression. His other hand came up to frame her face, and for a moment they just stood there, breathing each other's air and trembling on the edge of something that would change everything. "If we do this," Kai said, his voice rough with want, "there's no going back. Not for me." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you're not just some woman I'm attracted to, Zara. My wolf." He took a shaky breath. "My wolf has chosen you. If we cross this line, if I claim you, it won't be casual. It won't be temporary." The words sent a thrill of fear and excitement through her system. She'd heard about wolf bonds, about the intensity of shifter relationships, but she'd never experienced it firsthand. "Are you trying to scare me away?" she asked. "I'm trying to be honest about what this means." Zara searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. But all she saw was desire and devotion, and a love so fierce it took her breath away. "What if I told you," she said carefully, "that temporary was never an option for me either? What if I told you that my wolf has been restless and wanting since the moment I smelled your scent?" Kai's breath hitched. "Zara, what if I told you that I've never felt anything like this before, and I don't want to waste whatever time we have being afraid?" "Then I'd say," Kai whispered, leaning down until his forehead rested against hers, "that we've both been idiots for waiting this long." The kiss was different this time, hungry and desperate and full of days' worth of denied want. Zara's hands fisted in Kai's shirt, pulling him closer as he backed her against the wall. His mouth was hot and demanding, his hands roaming her body with a reverence that made her feel worshipped. When they broke apart for air, both of them were shaking. "Bedroom," Zara gasped against his neck.
Now.
Kai didn't need to be asked twice. He swept her up in his arms, carrying her toward the back of the cabin with quick, purposeful strides. But when they reached the bedroom doorway, he paused. "Are you sure?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. "Because once we do this..." Zara silenced him with another kiss, pouring all her certainty and desire into the connection between them. When she pulled back, his pupils were blown wide with want. "I'm sure," she whispered. "I'm sure about you, about this, about us." Something shifted in Kai's expression then, the last of his restraint finally snapping. He carried her into the bedroom and set her down gently beside the bed, then stepped back to look at her with eyes that glowed amber in the dim light. "You're so beautiful," he said quietly, his hands already reaching for the hem of her shirt. Zara's breath caught as cool air hit her skin, but Kai's touch was warm and reverent as he traced the lines of her body. When her shirt hit the floor, followed by his, she felt the last of her defenses crumble. This was happening. After days of tension and want and careful distance, they were finally giving in to the pull between them. "Tell me what you want," Kai murmured against her throat, his lips tracing a path of fire down to her collarbone. "You," Zara gasped, her hands mapping the planes of his chest, the scars that told the story of his dangerous life. "Just you." What followed was a claiming in the truest sense, hands and mouths and whispered words of devotion as they learned each other's bodies with desperate thoroughness. When Kai finally moved over her, his eyes glowing with his wolf's presence, Zara felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. This wasn't just sex. This was bonding, claiming, the forging of a connection that would last far beyond whatever happened in the next 3 days. "Mine," Kai growled against her throat as they moved together, and Zara felt the truth of it resonate in her bones. "Yours," she agreed, her nails digging into his shoulders as pleasure built between them like a storm. "Always yours." When release finally claimed them, it was with intensity that left them both shaking and breathless. Kai collapsed beside her, pulling her against his chest as they rode out the aftershocks together. "Well," Zara said when she could finally speak again, "that definitely complicates things." Kai's laugh rumbled through his chest. "Worth it, though." "Definitely worth it." She traced lazy patterns on his skin, marveling at how right this felt. "What happens now?" "Now," Kai said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, "we get some sleep. And tomorrow we finish planning a war." "And after the war?" Kai was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might have fallen asleep. But when she looked up at him, his green eyes were alert and thoughtful. After the war, he said quietly, we figure out what forever looks like. The words sent warmth flooding through Zara's chest. Forever. It was a concept she'd never allowed herself to consider before, but lying here in Kai's arms, she found she liked the sound of it. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its pack. But inside the cabin, wrapped in the warmth of new love and hard-won trust, Zara felt safer than she had in years. 3 days until they put everything on the line. 3 days until they faced an enemy that had already destroyed so many lives. But tonight, they had each other. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 6. Zara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, and for one disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory flooded back. The mission, the lodge, Kai, and she smiled against the pillow that still carried his scent. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and she could hear movement in the kitchen. The clock on the nightstand read 8:47 a.m. She'd slept better than she had in weeks, despite everything hanging over their heads. Or maybe because of it. There was something to be said for finally giving in to what you wanted, for stopping the constant fight against your own desires. Zara pulled on one of Kai's shirts and padded barefoot to the kitchen, where she found him standing at the stove, fully dressed and looking like he'd been up for hours. Morning, she said, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. Kai leaned back into her embrace, his free hand covering hers. Good morning. Sleep well? Better than I have in years. She pressed a kiss to the spot between his shoulder blades. You? Same. Kai turned in her arms, his green eyes warm with contentment. Coffee, please. Zara accepted the mug he handed her and took a grateful sip. What time is the final briefing?
10.
Victor's bringing the last of the recruits. We should have 23 people total. Kai's expression grew serious. It's really happening, Zara. Tomorrow night, we either end this or we die trying. The weight of it settled over them like a shroud. 24 hours from now, they'd be infiltrating the most dangerous gathering in the supernatural world, going up against enemies who'd been killing their kind for decades. Any regrets? Zara asked quietly. Kai studied her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. About the mission?
No.
These people need to be stopped, and we might be the only ones who can do it. That's not what I meant. About us. Kai's smile was soft and sure. Never. You? Zara thought about her old life, the solitude, the emotional distance, the safety of never caring too much about anyone. Then she looked at Kai and felt the mate bond humming between them like a living thing, warm and vital and absolutely right. No regrets, she said firmly. They were interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching, multiple engines, the crunch of tires on gravel. Through the window, Zara could see a convoy of trucks and SUVs pulling up to the lodge. Showtime, Kai said, but he didn't move away from her immediately. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply, as if he was trying to memorize the taste of her. What was that for? Zara asked when they broke apart. In case I don't get another chance, Kai said simply. The words sent a chill through her, but before she could respond, the front door opened and Victor walked in, followed by a stream of wolves Zara had never seen before. Hope we're not interrupting anything, Victor said with a knowing smirk, taking in Zara's state of undress and Kai's rumpled appearance. Nothing that can't wait, Kai replied smoothly, but Zara caught the flush that crept up his neck. The next hour was organized chaos as the final team assembled in the lodge's main room. Zara found herself studying the faces around her. Some she recognized from the past few days, others were complete strangers. All of them had one thing in common. They'd lost someone to the organization they were about to attack. There was Maria Santos, whose daughter had been kidnapped and forced into prostitution. David Chun, whose brother had been turned into a drug-addicted killing machine. Rebecca Wolf, whose entire pack had been slaughtered when they tried to resist recruitment. Each person carried their own grief, their own need for justice. But they also carried hope, the first real hope they'd had in years that their enemies might finally face consequences. All right, people, Victor called the room to order. This is it. Final briefing, Final assignments, final chance to back out if you're having second thoughts. No one moved. Good. Victor nodded to Kai. Take it away. Kai stepped forward, and Zara felt a surge of pride at the way he commanded the room. Gone was any trace of the haunted man she'd first met. In his place stood a leader, someone these people trusted to guide them through the most dangerous night of their lives. The winter gathering begins tomorrow at sunset, Kai began, spreading the familiar blueprints across the table. Intelligence suggests there will be at least 50 people in attendance, 11 of our primary targets, plus their security details and various hangers-on. He pointed to different sections of the map. Team Alpha, led by Victor, will take the eastern approach. Your job is to neutralize the perimeter guards and secure the main entrance. Team Beta, under Maria's command, handles the western side, same objective. What about communications? Asked David. Marcus will be our tech support, jamming their systems and monitoring police frequencies. The moment this goes sideways, we'll know about it. Zara found herself assigned to Team Gamma, the group tasked with infiltrating the main house and taking down the leadership. It was the most dangerous assignment, the one most likely to result in casualties. It was also the mission Kai would be leading personally. Questions? Kai asked when he'd finished laying out the plan. Rebecca raised her hand. What's our extraction plan, if things go bad? There isn't one, Kai said bluntly. If we let any of them escape, they'll disappear, and we'll never get another chance like this. We go in knowing that we either succeed completely, or we don't come out at all. The room fell silent as the weight of that statement settled over them. These people weren't just risking their lives. They were essentially volunteering for a suicide mission. Anyone want to reconsider? Victor asked quietly. Still, no one moved. Then we're committed, Kai said. Get some rest, check your gear, and say whatever goodbyes you need to say. We meet at the rally point at 6 p.m. tomorrow. As the room began to empty, people dispersing to their various quarters and preparations, Zara lingered behind. She watched Kai carefully rolling up the blueprints, his movements precise and controlled. You know this could be the last night we have, she said quietly when they were alone. Kai's hands stilled on the papers. I know. And you're okay with that? With the possibility that we might not see another sunrise together? Kai finished securing the maps and turned to face her. His green eyes were steady, but shadowed with the weight of what they were planning. I'm okay with fighting for something that matters, he said carefully. I'm okay with finally having a chance to balance the scales. What I'm not okay with is the idea that you might get hurt because of choices I made. Zara moved closer, reaching up to touch his face. This isn't just about your choices anymore, Kai. I'm here because I choose to be here. I know, but... No buts. She silenced him with a kiss that was fierce and possessive. We're partners, remember? In this mission, in whatever comes after. You don't get to protect me by pushing me away. Kai's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest. I can't lose you, he whispered against her hair. Not when I've just found you. Then don't, Zara said simply. We go in together, we watch each other's backs, and we come out together. That's the plan. And if the plan goes wrong? Zara pulled back to meet his gaze. Then we make sure our lives meant something. We make sure the people who follow us have a better world to live in. They spent the rest of the day in quiet preparation, cleaning weapons, reviewing escape routes, checking and double-checking their gear. But underneath the tactical preparations was an undercurrent of desperate intimacy, as if they were both trying to pack a lifetime of love into the hours they had left. They made love again that afternoon, slowly and tenderly, memorizing each touch and whispered endearment. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they lay tangled together in the gathering darkness. I love you, Kai said quietly, the words falling into the silence like stones into still water. Zara's breath caught. They were the words she'd been afraid to hear, afraid to say, afraid to even think. Words that made this real in a way that changed everything. I love you too, she replied, and felt something settle into place in her chest, something that felt like coming home. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear, and somewhere in the distance, She could hear the other teams preparing for what might be their final night alive. But here, in this moment, wrapped in Kai's arms and surrounded by the scent of their bonding, Zara felt a peace she'd never experienced before. Whatever happened tomorrow, they would face it together. And maybe, if they were very lucky and very careful, they might even survive to see what forever actually looked like. But even if they didn't, at least they'd had this. At least they'd found each other in time to know what love felt like when it was real and deep and worth dying for. The calm before the storm was ending. Tomorrow, they would either win their freedom or die in the attempt. Tonight, they had love. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 7. The Blackwood estate rose from the winter landscape like something from a Gothic nightmare, all sharp angles and dark stone, surrounded by walls that seemed designed more to keep people in than out. From their position in the tree line, Zara could see lights blazing in every window, could hear the distant sound of music and laughter drifting across the snow. A party. Their enemies were having a party while plotting the destruction of innocent lives. Radio check. Victor's voice crackled through her earpiece. Team Alpha in position. Team Beta ready, came Maria's reply. Tech support online, Marcus added. Their communications are jammed, and I've got eyes on their security feeds. Kai's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing briefly before letting go. Around them, the 6 other members of Team Gamma checked their weapons one final time. This was it, the moment they'd been planning for, training for, preparing to die for. Team Gamma is go. Kai spoke into his mic. All teams, remember, we have one shot at this. Make it count. They moved through the forest like ghosts, using every shadow and depression in the landscape to avoid detection. The main house loomed larger as they approached, its windows glowing like malevolent eyes in the darkness. Zara felt her wolf stirring beneath her skin, responding to the proximity of so many potential threats. Beside her, she could sense Kai's predator instincts sharpening, his human facade slipping away to reveal the deadly hunter underneath. Motion sensors deactivated. Marcus's voice whispered through their comms. You have a 30-second window. They sprinted across the open ground, reaching the service entrance just as the sensors came back online. Kai produced a set of lockpicks, and within moments, they were inside the estate's lower level. The basement was a maze of service corridors and storage rooms, lit only by emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows on the walls. Zara could hear footsteps above them, dozens of them, moving back and forth in what she assumed was the main gathering. Security office is this way, Kai whispered, leading them down a narrow hallway. We need to take out their backup communications before we proceed. The security office was occupied by 2 guards who never saw them coming. Rebecca and David handled the takedown with professional efficiency, while Marcus immediately went to work on the computer systems. Got it, he announced after a few tense minutes. Backup communications are down, and I'm looping their security feeds. We're invisible now. Good. Kai pulled out his copy of the blueprints, spreading it across the desk. The main ballroom is here, 2 levels up. Intelligence suggests most of our targets will be there, schmoozing and making deals. What about the rest? Asked Sarah, one of the newer recruits. Private meetings in the offices on the 3rd floor, Zara replied, studying the layout. We split up. Half the team takes the ballroom, half goes upstairs. I don't like splitting our forces, Rebecca said with a frown. Neither do I, Kai admitted. But we don't have enough people to do this any other way. Time is not on our side. Eventually, someone's going to notice their communications are down. As if summoned by his words, the lights flickered once, then stabilized. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to sound, not loud enough to panic the party guests, but clear enough to alert security. Shit, Marcus muttered, frantically typing. They have a backup system I missed. Teams Alpha and Beta have been made. The sound of gunfire erupted from outside, sharp cracks that cut through the winter air like breaking glass. Through the basement windows, Zara could see muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness around the estate's perimeter. All teams report, Kai barked into his mic. Team Alpha is engaged. Victor's voice came through, tight with strain. We've got them pinned down, but they have superior numbers. Team Beta is taking heavy fire, Maria added. We need backup or we're not going to make it to the extraction point. Kai's jaw clenched as he processed the tactical situation. Their carefully planned assault was falling apart, but they were too deep to turn back now. Teams Alpha and Beta, hold your positions and keep them busy, he ordered. Team Gamma is proceeding with the primary objective. Kai. Victor's voice was sharp with concern. That's an order. Kai cut him off. If we don't complete the mission, everything we've sacrificed means nothing. He switched off his radio and looked around at the faces of his team. 7 people, including himself and Zara, against an entire estate full of trained killers. Anyone want to reconsider? He asked quietly. The responses were immediate and unanimous. They'd come too far, lost too much, to give up now. All right then. Kai folded up the blueprints and checked his weapon. Rebecca, Sarah, David, you take the ballroom. Marcus stays here to monitor communications. Zara and I will handle the 3rd floor. As they prepared to separate, Zara caught Kai's arm. Be careful up there, she said quietly. You too. He leaned down to kiss her, quick and fierce and tasting of desperation. I'll see you on the other side. They moved through the mansion like avenging angels, silent and deadly and completely focused on their objective. The party continued above them, the guests apparently unaware that a war was being fought just outside their windows. The 3rd floor was quieter, more intimate. Heavy doors led to private offices and conference rooms where the real business of the organization was conducted. Zara could smell fear and excitement and the metallic tang of recent violence. These people weren't just criminals, they were predators who enjoyed their work. The first office contained Sebastian Morozov, the man who controlled the Eastern Territories. He was in the middle of a phone call when Kai kicked in the door, his eyes widening in recognition before Zara put 2 bullets center mass. One down, she said into her mic. Copy that, came Rebecca's voice. We're in position in the ballroom. Jesus Christ, there are so many of them. Remember, Kai said as they moved to the next office, we only need to get the leadership. Take out the heads and the body dies. The next room held 2 targets, a woman named Shun Li who specialized in human trafficking, and her partner Marcus Webb, who Zara recognized with a sick feeling in her stomach. Hello, Marcus, she said as they entered the room, her gun trained on the man who'd hired her to protect Kai. Webb's face went white as he realized the scope of the betrayal. Zara? What the hell are you doing here? My job, she said simply, and pulled the trigger. The sound of automatic gunfire exploded from the ballroom below them, followed by screams and shouts of alarm. The party was over. Their enemies now knew they were under attack. Rebecca, report. Kai barked into his radio. Static. Sarah? David. More static, punctuated by the distant sound of breaking glass and running feet. They're gone. Marcus's voice came through, tight with fear. All of them. The ballroom team is down. Zara felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Rebecca, Sarah, David, people she'd trained with, planned with, shared meals with over the past few days.
Gone.
How many targets did they get? Kai asked, his voice deadly calm. 4 confirmed kills before communications went dark, Marcus replied. That leaves 7 primary targets still active, plus however many security personnel.
7.
They'd started with 11, killed 4, but 7 of the most dangerous people in the supernatural underworld were still alive, and now very much aware they were being hunted. Change of plans, Kai said grimly. Marcus, can you get us building schematics for the panic room? The what? Every mansion like this has a secure room where VIPs can retreat during an attack. Find it. Zara knew what Kai was thinking. If their remaining targets had any sense, they'd be barricaded in the most defensible position available, probably with enough firepower to hold off a small army. Found it, Marcus said after a few tense minutes. Sub-basement level, reinforced walls, separate ventilation system. But Kai, the access points are heavily defended. How heavily? Motion sensors, pressure plates, automated turrets. And that's assuming they haven't manually locked it down from the inside. Through the mansion around them, Zara could hear the sound of organized pursuit, boots on marble floors, orders being shouted, the distinctive whine of tactical radios. They were being hunted now, outnumbered and outgunned in enemy territory. "We need to move," she said urgently. "They'll have our position triangulated soon." But even as they prepared to leave the office, the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside made them both freeze. Heavy boots, moving with military precision. At least 6 people, possibly more. They were trapped. Kai moved to the window, peering through the heavy curtains at the courtyard below. It was a straight drop of 30 feet to frozen ground, survivable for wolves, but barely. "On my mark," he whispered, already working to unlatch the window. We jumped together, shift before we hit the ground, and run for the tree line. "What about the panic room?" Zara asked. "What about finishing the mission?" Kai turned to look at her, his green eyes fierce with determination. "We regroup with whatever's left of the other teams, and we find another way. But first, we survive." The footsteps stopped outside their door. Zara heard the soft click of safeties being disengaged, the whispered countdown that preceded a breach. "Now," Kai said, and they went through the window together. The fall seemed to last forever, wind rushing past them as the ground rushed up to meet them. At the last moment, Zara felt her wolf surge forward, bones cracking and reforming as she shifted in midair. She hit the ground on 4 paws, rolling with the impact and immediately sprinting for the tree line. Beside her, Kai's dark wolf kept pace, his larger form cutting through the snow like a shadow. Behind them, the window they jumped from exploded outward in a shower of glass and automatic gunfire. Bullets whined through the air around them, but the darkness and their speed made them difficult targets. They reached the forest just as the entire mansion lit up like Christmas, floodlights blazing to life and illuminating the grounds in harsh, white light. The hunt was on in earnest now. But they were alive. Bloodied, outnumbered, with most of their team dead or missing, but alive. And as long as they were breathing, the mission wasn't over. The real fight was just beginning. Chapter 8. They ran through the forest for what felt like hours, their wolf forms cutting through the snow and underbrush with desperate speed. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit gradually faded, but Zara knew it was only temporary. Their enemies had resources, technology, and numbers on their side. When they finally stopped at a prearranged fallback position, a small hunter's cabin 5 miles from the estate, both of them were exhausted and bleeding from various cuts and scrapes. They shifted back to human form, the cold air hitting their naked skin like a slap. "Marcus," Kai gasped into his radio, pulling on the spare clothes they'd stashed here days ago. "Report." Static answered him for long, terrible moments. Then Marcus's voice came through, weak and shaky. "I'm here. Barely. They found me in the security office. I had to run. Teams Alpha and Beta? Victor's down. Shot 3 times, but Maria got him out. They're at Rally Point Charlie, with maybe 6 survivors total." Zara closed her eyes, grief and rage warring in her chest. They'd started with 23 people. Now they had maybe 10 left alive, and who knew how many of those were seriously injured? The targets? Kai asked, though Zara could tell he already knew the answer would be bad. "All 7 remaining targets are alive and in the wind," Marcus confirmed. "They evacuated the estate 20 minutes after we lost contact. Private jets, multiple destinations. They're scattered to the wind." The mission was a failure. Not just a failure, a catastrophe. Most of their people were dead, their enemies had escaped, and now everyone involved would be hunted until the organization tracked them down and eliminated them one by one. "There's more," Marcus continued, his voice even shakier now. "Kai, they knew we were coming. Someone tipped them off." Kai went very still. "What do you mean?" "The security feeds I hacked. I managed to save some footage before I ran. You need to see this." "Send it to my secure phone." "Already done." Kai pulled out a satellite phone with a small screen and accessed the encrypted files Marcus had sent. What he saw there made his face go white. "What is it?" Zara asked, moving to look over his shoulder. The footage was grainy security camera video, time-stamped from 2 hours before their assault. It showed a man entering the estate through the front gate, being escorted not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest. A man Zara recognized. Son of a bitch, she breathed. The man on the screen was Victor. He sold us out, Kai said, his voice hollow with disbelief. Victor sold us all out. Zara stared at the footage, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Victor, who'd lost his mate and cubs. Victor, who'd sworn vengeance against the organization. Victor, who'd recruited half their team personally. But why, she asked. His family. Maybe his family was never dead, Kai said grimly. Or maybe they made him a deal he couldn't refuse. Either way, we walked into a trap. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If Victor had betrayed them, then he knew about this fallback position. He knew about all their contingency plans, all their safe houses, all their escape routes. We have to move, she said urgently. If Victor's working with them, then nowhere is safe, Kai finished. He was already pulling on his jacket, checking his weapons. Marcus, can you hear me? I'm here. Get to the secondary extraction point. Tell whoever's left from the teams to scatter, different directions, different countries if possible. Don't trust anyone. Don't contact anyone. Go dark and stay dark. What about you? Kai looked at Zara, something fierce and desperate in his green eyes. We're going to finish this.
How?
The targets are gone. Our people are dead or scattered. Because we still have one advantage, Kai interrupted. They think we're defeated. They think we're going to run and hide like beaten dogs. Aren't we? Kai's smile was sharp as a blade.
No.
We're going hunting. Before Zara could ask what he meant, the sound of engines cut through the night air. Multiple vehicles, approaching fast. Through the cabin windows, she could see headlights sweeping through the trees. They found us, she said, grabbing her gear. Back window, Kai ordered. Move. They went out the rear of the cabin just as the front door exploded inward. Armed figures in tactical gear poured through the opening, their weapons sweeping the empty rooms with professional precision. But Kai and Zara were already gone, melting into the forest like shadows. This way, Kai whispered, leading her deeper into the woods. There's something I need to show you. They moved in silence for another hour, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. When they finally stopped, it was at what looked like a completely unremarkable patch of forest floor. Kai knelt and brushed away snow and leaves, revealing a hidden hatch. Emergency cache, he explained, pulling it open. I've been preparing for this possibility for years. The cache contained weapons, ammunition, cash in multiple currencies, false identification papers, and something that made Zara's breath catch, a thick file folder marked with names and locations. The real targets, Kai said, pulling out the folder. Not just the 11 we were hunting tonight. All of them. Every single person involved in the organization, from the foot soldiers to the puppet masters we've never even heard of. How many? 63 active members. Plus another 24 in supporting roles. Kai's expression was grim. What we hit tonight was just the tip of the iceberg. Zara stared at the files, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what they were facing. We can't take on 63 people by ourselves. We don't have to take them all at once, Kai said. We hit them where they live, where they work, where they feel safe. One by one, until there's no one left to run the organization. That could take years. Then it takes years. Kai met her gaze steadily. These people destroyed Victor's family, manipulated him into betraying us, and got most of our friends killed tonight. I'm not walking away from this, Zara. Not ever. She could hear the absolute conviction in his voice, could see the determination burning in his eyes like green fire. This wasn't just about justice anymore, it was personal. What about us? She asked quietly. What about the life we talked about building together? This is our life now, Kai said simply. At least until it's finished. The words hit her like cold water. She thought they were fighting for a future together, but apparently that future would have to wait indefinitely while they waged a private war against an organization that spanned continents. And if it's never finished, she pressed. If there are always more enemies, more targets, more reasons to keep fighting? Kai was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was soft and sad. "Then I guess we'll find out how much forever really means." A howl echoed through the forest, long and mournful and far too close. They were being tracked, probably by wolves who could follow their scent trail no matter how carefully they tried to hide it. "Decision time," Kai said, packing the files back into the cache. "Come with me, and we spend however long it takes hunting these bastards down. Or walk away now, and I'll make sure you disappear somewhere safe." Zara looked at the man she loved, at the scars and shadows that told the story of his 5-year quest for redemption, and realized she'd already made her choice days ago. "I told you before," she said firmly. "I finish what I start." Kai's smile was brilliant and heartbreaking at the same time. "Even if it costs us everything?" "Everything except each other." They sealed the cache and moved deeper into the woods, following a route Kai had memorized years ago toward a safe house that hopefully Victor didn't know about. Behind them, the howls grew closer, but ahead lay only darkness and uncertainty. The organization thought they'd won tonight. They thought they'd broken the resistance, scattered their enemies, and ensured their continued dominance over the supernatural underworld. They were wrong, because somewhere in the darkness, 2 wolves ran side by side toward an uncertain future, carrying with them the names and locations of every person responsible for the night's massacre. The real war was just beginning. And this time, there would be no mercy. "I love you," Zara said as they ran, the words carrying on the wind between them. "I love you too," Kai replied. "Always." The howls behind them grew louder, more urgent. Their enemies were closing in, but they were no longer running away. They were running toward something. Toward justice. Toward vengeance. Toward whatever tomorrow would bring. Together. Chapter 9. 3 weeks later, Zara crouched on a rooftop in Prague, watching through binoculars as their target entered the hotel across the street. Dr. Helena Kovac, one of the organization's key scientists, the woman who developed the chemical compounds used to control and manipulate kidnapped wolves. "Target acquired," she whispered into her throat mic. "3rd floor, room 312. "Copy that," Kai's voice came back, calm and professional. "I'm in position in the stairwell. Begin your approach." They'd gotten good at this over the past 3 weeks. 7 targets eliminated across 4 countries, each death made to look like accidents or random violence. Car crashes, muggings gone wrong, tragic falls from hotel balconies. The organization was starting to notice, starting to panic.
"Good."
Zara made her way down from the roof and across the street, every sense alert for signs of surveillance or ambush. They'd learned the hard way that their enemies were adapting, hiring additional security, changing their routines. But fear made people sloppy, and desperation made them predictable. She entered the hotel through the service entrance, using the key card she'd lifted from a housekeeper earlier that day. The 3rd-floor hallway was empty, lit only by dim emergency lighting that cast long shadows on the worn carpet. Room 312 was at the end of the hall. Zara could hear voices inside, Helena's distinctive accent, and at least one other person. Male, older, speaking in what sounded like Russian. She pressed her ear to the door, listening to the conversation within. "Can't keep running like this," Helena was saying, her voice tight with stress. 7 dead in 3 weeks. They're picking us off one by one. "Which is why we're moving up the timeline," the Russian voice replied. "The London facility is ready. We begin the next phase tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "But the test subjects aren't properly conditioned yet. They'll have to do. We need to complete the project before our hunters find us." Zara felt ice run through her veins. Project. Test subjects. They were talking about something bigger than individual crimes, something that involved multiple facilities and human experimentation. "Are you getting this?" she whispered into her mic. "Every word," Kai replied grimly. "Change of plans. We take them both alive."
Alive.
That was going to complicate things considerably, but if these people had information about a larger operation, they needed to know what it was. Zara picked the lock with practiced efficiency and slipped into the room. Helena stood by the window, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and cold blue eyes. "Hands where I can see them," she said quietly. "Nice and slow." "You're one of them," Helena breathed, recognition dawning in her eyes. The ones who've been hunting us. Smart woman, Zara agreed. Now sit down and keep your mouth shut. Kai appeared in the doorway behind her, having come up through the hotel's internal staircase. Between the two of them, they had both targets covered with no chance of escape. Dr. Helena Kovac, Kai said conversationally, as if they were meeting at a cocktail party. And Dmitry Volkov, if I'm not mistaken. I've been looking forward to meeting both of you. Volkov's face went white. You're Kai Rivers. You're supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint you. Kai's smile was sharp as a blade. Now, about this project you mentioned. The London facility.
Tell me about it.
Go to hell, Helena spat. Eventually, Kai agreed. But first, you're going to tell me everything I want to know. Because the alternative is much, much worse than whatever you're imagining. To emphasize his point, he let his eyes shift slightly, the green irises taking on an amber glow that spoke of the wolf barely leashed beneath his human skin. Helena and Volkov exchanged a look, and Zara could smell their fear spiking.
Good.
Terrified people made mistakes, and mistakes led to information. The facility is in Canary Wharf, Helena said finally. Underground levels beneath a legitimate pharmaceutical company. We've been developing enhanced control methods. Enhanced how? Zara interrupted. Chemical compounds that don't just suppress wolf instincts, but allow us to program specific behaviors. Create perfect soldiers who follow orders without question or hesitation. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. They weren't just trafficking wolves anymore, they were turning them into mindless weapons. How many test subjects? Kai asked, his voice deadly calm. 47 currently in various stages of conditioning, Volkov replied reluctantly. But the process has a high mortality rate. We've lost nearly twice that many in the past 6 months. Nearly 100 wolves, dead or worse than dead. Zara felt rage building in her chest, hot and pure and demanding action. Who's running the operation? She asked. Alexei Petrov, Helena said. He's one of the original founders, been with the organization for 30 years. The London facility is his pet project. Kai and Zara exchanged a look. Petrov wasn't on their original list of targets. He'd been operating so far in the shadows that they hadn't even known he existed. Where can we find him? Kai asked. You can't, Volkov said with grim satisfaction. He never leaves the facility. 24-hour security, multiple fail-safes. It's a fortress. Every fortress has a weakness, Zara said. What's his? Helena laughed, a bitter sound. His weakness is that he's completely insane. Believes he's building a master race of controllable shifters. Nothing else matters to him. Not money, not power, not even his own safety. That's not a weakness, Kai observed. That's fanaticism. It's both, Helena replied. Because fanatics make predictable choices. Petrov will never abandon the project, never run, never hide. He'll fight to the death to protect his work. Which meant they'd have to go to him. Into a fortified facility, against superior numbers, with no backup and no exit strategy. It was suicide. It was also the only way to stop whatever horror was being inflicted on those 47 wolves. Communications, Zara said suddenly. How does Petrov stay in contact with the rest of the organization? Encrypted satellite uplink, Volkov said. Daily status reports, funding transfers, personnel requests. And if that communication was suddenly cut off? Helena's eyes widened as she understood what Zara was suggesting. He'd assumed the worst. Lock down the facility completely, execute all the test subjects to prevent them from being rescued. So, we need to get inside before he realizes his network is compromised, Kai said thoughtfully. How long between status reports? 18 hours, Helena replied. The next one is due at midnight tomorrow. Zara checked her watch. That gave them roughly 24 hours to plan an assault on a fortress, rescue 47 drugged and conditioned wolves, and eliminate one of the most dangerous men in the supernatural underworld. Blueprints, she said. Security protocols. Staff schedules. We need everything you have. And why would we give you that? Volkov asked. Kai's smile was cold as winter. Because if you help us stop Petrov, You get to live long enough to stand trial. If you don't. He let the threat hang in the air. Helena and Volkov looked at each other again, and Zara could see them weighing their options. Die now, or die later, but potentially save their own lives in the process. There's a safe in my hotel room, Helena said finally. Code is 47-12-89. Everything you need is in there. Guard them, Kai said to Zara. I'll be right back. He disappeared into the hallway, leaving Zara alone with two people who'd spent years turning innocent wolves into weapons. She kept her gun trained on them, but her mind was already racing ahead to the challenges they'd face in London. 47 prisoners to evacuate. Unknown security forces to neutralize. A fanatic to kill before he could execute his victims out of spite. And she and Kai would be doing it alone, with no backup and no margin for error. When Kai returned with a thick folder of documents, his expression was grim. It's worse than they said, he announced, spreading blueprints across the hotel room desk. The facility has 7 levels underground, with the test subjects spread across 3 of them. Automated defense systems, poison gas failsafes, and at least 30 armed guards. Zara studied the layouts, her tactical mind automatically cataloging challenges and potential solutions. Entry points. 3. Main elevator from the pharmaceutical company above, emergency stairs in the northwest corner, and a service tunnel that connects to the London Underground. Which one gives us the best chance? Kai traced a route with his finger. Service tunnel gets us closest to the detention levels without triggering the main security grid. But once we're inside, we'll be cut off from any retreat. Then we better not need to retreat, Zara said grimly. The corridor beyond was lined with cells, each one containing a figure huddled on a narrow cot. Most of the prisoners appeared to be sleeping, but Zara could see the telltale signs of drug-induced stupor, slack faces, vacant stares, the absolute stillness of people whose will had been chemically erased. Jesus, Kai breathed, stopping at the first cell. The prisoner was a young woman, maybe 25, with matted blonde hair and track marks on her arms where 4 lines had been repeatedly inserted. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing with the expression of someone whose mind was no longer fully their own. How long? Zara asked, her voice thick with rage. She's been here 8 months, Helena replied quietly. One of the early success stories. Completely compliant, follows any order without question or hesitation. Can she be saved? Can the conditioning be reversed? Helena's silence was answer enough. Zara felt something cold and murderous settle in her chest. These weren't just prisoners. They were people who'd been systematically destroyed, turned into empty shells wearing familiar faces. Open the cells, she said, her voice deadly calm. All of them. Every single one. We're taking everyone, whether they can be saved or not. It took precious minutes to unlock all 15 cells, and several more to coax the prisoners out into the corridor. Most of them moved like sleepwalkers, responding to direct commands but showing no initiative or awareness of their situation. They can't run, Helena warned as they prepared to move to the next level. The drugs affect motor function. You'll have to guide them every step. Then that's what we do, Kai said firmly. No one gets left behind. Level B held another 20 prisoners in similar condition, though a few showed signs of fighting the chemical control. One man, scarred and hollow-eyed, grabbed Zara's arm as she opened his cell. Please, he whispered, his voice barely human. Kill me. Don't let them put me back in the machine. Zara's heart broke a little more. We're getting you out, she promised. All of you. Can't think straight. The voices in my head, they're not mine anymore. Hold on, Zara said, helping him to his feet. Just hold on a little longer. They were herding 35 drugged and disoriented prisoners through the service corridors when the alarm started. Red lights flashed, and a recorded voice began announcing a facility-wide lockdown. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, cutting off several of their planned escape routes. What happened to 15 minutes? Kai demanded, grabbing Volkov by the shirt. I don't know. Maybe someone missed their check-in, maybe. It doesn't matter, Zara interrupted. We adapt. But even as she said it, She knew their situation had just become impossible. 35 prisoners who could barely walk on their own, emergency exits sealed, and somewhere above them, Alexei Petrov was probably ordering his guards to execute every prisoner rather than let them be rescued. Emergency stairs, Helena said urgently. Northwest corner, 3 levels up. They can't seal those. Fire code requires manual overrides. How do we get 35 people up 3 flights of stairs without being spotted? We don't, Kai said grimly. We split up. You take the prisoners, get them to the stairs. I'll handle level C and then deal with Petrov. Absolutely not. We stick together. Zara, there are 12 more prisoners on level C. If I don't get them now, they'll be dead in minutes. She knew he was right, hated that he was right, but couldn't argue with the logic. 47 levs against their need to stay together. 5 minutes, she said finally. You get 5 minutes to clear level C, then we all leave together. Kai kissed her quickly, fiercely. I love you. Don't you dare say goodbye to me. 5 minutes, he promised, and disappeared down a corridor that led deeper into the facility. Zara turned to face 35 traumatized prisoners and 2 reluctant guides, knowing she had to get them all to safety, while her mate ran toward almost certain death. Move, she ordered, and began the longest 5 minutes of her life. The emergency stairs were a nightmare of narrow steps and locked doors, with prisoners stumbling and falling at every turn. Some of them were starting to come out of their drug-induced haze, which made them more aware, but also more panicked. Where are we going? One woman kept asking. They said we'd be safe here. They promised we'd be safe. You will be, Zara lied, knowing that even if they escaped the facility, most of these people would never truly recover from what had been done to them. When they finally reached the street-level exit, Zara's watch showed 8 minutes had passed. Kai was 3 minutes overdue, and she could hear gunfire echoing up from the depths of the building. Go, she told Helena and Volkov, gesturing toward the prisoners. Get them to the rally point. Medical teams are standing by. What about you? I'm going back for him. You'll never make it in time. The whole facility will be crawling with guards by now. Zara checked her weapons and grabbed the explosive charges from her belt. Then I better hurry. She plunged back into the nightmare of the facility, following the sound of gunfire and the pull of the mate bond that connected her to Kai. Whatever was happening down there, wherever he was, she was going to find him, even if it killed them both. Because she'd made him a promise, and Zara Kane always kept her promises. The war was ending one way or another. Tonight. Chapter 11. The gunfire led Zara deeper into the bowels of the facility, past laboratories filled with surgical equipment and holding tanks that reeked of chemical horror. Bodies littered the corridors, guards who'd underestimated the fury of a wolf fighting for innocent lives. She followed the scent of Kai's blood, fear and rage warring in her chest with each drop she found. He was hurt, bleeding, but still moving, still fighting. The trail led to level C, where she found the final 12 prisoners huddled in a storage room. Unlike the others, these wolves were alert, aware, and terrified, their conditioning incomplete. Where is he? She demanded of a young man whose arm hung at an unnatural angle. The White Room, he gasped, pointing down a corridor that glowed with harsh fluorescent light. The man with green eyes. He made us hide here, said he'd come back. But there were so many guards. Zara's heart clenched. Kai had gotten the prisoners to safety, but had been trapped himself. And if he was in the White Room, that meant he was facing Petrov directly. Can you all move? She asked quickly. I think so, the young man replied. Whatever they were giving us, it's wearing off. We can feel our wolves again. Then get to the emergency stairs, northwest corner. Helena and Volkov will guide you out. Zara pressed a spare weapon into his good hand. If anyone tries to stop you, shoot first and ask questions later. She left them organizing their escape and ran toward the White Room, following the sound of voices raised in argument. The room she found was an operating theater from hell, surgical tables equipped with restraints, for stands loaded with chemical cocktails and monitoring equipment that tracked vital signs with cold precision. In the center of it all stood Alexei Petrov. He was smaller than Zara had expected, a thin man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of pale eyes that belonged on a corpse. But the aura of absolute madness that surrounded him made him seem larger, more dangerous, like a spider at the center of a web that spanned continents. Kai knelt on the floor beside him, hands zip-tied behind his back and blood streaming from a head wound. His green eyes blazed with defiant fury, but Zara could see the effects of whatever drugs they'd forced into his system. His movements were sluggish, his wolf suppressed. Petrov said when he noticed Zara in the doorway, not seeming surprised or alarmed by her presence. The maid arrives. How wonderfully predictable. Let him go, Zara said, her weapon trained on the madman's chest. Let him go. Petrov laughed, a sound like breaking glass. My dear child, you misunderstand the situation entirely. Your mate volunteered to take the place of my test subjects. Such noble self-sacrifice deserves to be properly appreciated. What are you talking about? Petrov gestured toward a table covered with syringes and monitoring equipment. I'm talking about the final phase of my research. You see, all my previous subjects were weak, broken wolves, outcasts, individuals with no real strength of will. But this one... He placed a possessive hand on Kai's shoulder, and Zara saw her mate flinch away from the touch. This one has the kind of focused rage that could reshape the world, if properly channeled. You're insane. I'm a visionary. Petrov's eyes gleamed with fanatic fervor. Do you know what I could accomplish with a weapon like him? Someone with his skills, his determination, his capacity for violence, but stripped of inconvenient emotions like guilt or mercy. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. Petrov didn't just want to control Kai. He wanted to turn him into the perfect assassin, someone who could eliminate the organization's enemies without question or hesitation. I'll kill you first, she said flatly. Will you? Petrov smiled and pressed a button on a remote control. Immediately, poison gas began hissing from vents around the room. The moment I release this button, or if my heart stops beating, this room fills with enough toxin to kill every wolf in the facility. Your precious mate dies, along with any prisoners who haven't escaped yet. Zara's blood ran cold as she realized the trap she'd walked into. Petrov had been counting on her coming for Kai, had prepared this exact scenario. But I'm not unreasonable, Petrov continued conversationally. I'll make you a deal. Submit to the conditioning yourself, become my willing assistant, and I'll let him live. You can work together, serve the organization together, for as long as you both survive. Never. Such certainty. Tell me, how many of your friends died because of choices he made? How many people have suffered because you've been helping him wage his private war? The words were designed to hurt, to plant seeds of doubt and guilt. And despite herself, Zara felt them find their mark. How many people had died at the winter gathering? How many would die in the war they'd started? I see the doubt in your eyes, Petrov said softly. Good. Doubt is the beginning of wisdom. Submit willingly, and I'll make the process quick and painless. Fight me, and I'll make sure you both suffer for weeks before the conditioning takes hold. On the floor, Kai was struggling against his restraints, trying to speak through whatever gag they'd used to silence him. His green eyes met hers across the room, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Not fear, not defeat, but determination, and a kind of desperate love that transcended the horror of their situation. He was trying to tell her something, but she couldn't understand what. Choose, Petrov demanded, raising the remote control. Submit or watch him die. Zara looked at the madman who'd tortured dozens of innocent wolves, at the room filled with instruments of psychological destruction, at the mate who meant more to her than life itself. And she made her choice. Okay, she said, slowly lowering her weapon. You win. I'll submit to the conditioning. Petrov's smile was triumphant. Excellent. Place your weapon on the floor, and... Zara pulled the pins from both explosive charges on her belt and held them up where Petrov could see them. New plan, she said calmly. I'm going to count to 3. On 3, I drop these grenades and this whole level goes up in flames. 1. Petrov's face went white. You're bluffing. You'll kill him too. 2. Wait. We can negotiate. 2.5. Stop. Petrov's hand shook on the remote control. If you detonate those explosives, the poison gas releases automatically. Everyone dies. Then I guess we all die together. Zara met Kai's eyes across the room, seeing understanding and approval there. That's better than letting you turn either of us into monsters. For a moment, they stood frozen in a tableau of mutual destruction. Petrov with his finger on a button that would kill them all, Zara with grenades that would accomplish the same thing, and Kai bound and helpless between them. Then Kai did something that changed everything. He threw himself sideways, breaking his own shoulder in the process, but knocking into a cart full of surgical instruments. The crash distracted Petrov for just a moment, but a moment was all Zara needed. She threw one grenade toward the gas vents and the other toward the computer systems that controlled the facility's security, then dove toward Kai as the world exploded around them. The explosion was deafening, filling the white room with smoke and fire and the acrid smell of destroyed electronics. Emergency sprinklers activated, sending streams of water cascading down as alarms wailed throughout the facility. When the smoke cleared enough to see, Petrov lay motionless beneath a collapsed section of ceiling, his remote control shattered beside him. The poison gas vents had been destroyed, along with most of the laboratory equipment. Kai. Zara crawled toward her mate, coughing from the smoke and debris. Talk to me. His green eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. Did we get them all? He asked hoarsely. All 47. Zara worked to free his hands from the zip ties, her fingers shaking with adrenaline. Helena and Volkov are getting them to safety.
Good.
Kai tried to sit up and immediately went pale from pain. His shoulder was definitely dislocated, possibly broken, and she could see burns on his arms from the explosion. We need to get out of here, Zara said, helping him to his feet. The whole building is going to come down. They limped through corridors filled with smoke and falling debris, past laboratories that would never again see human experimentation, past holding cells that would never again contain innocent prisoners. The organization's most ambitious project was ending in fire and collapse, its architect dead beneath the ruins of his own madness. When they finally emerged onto the London street, dawn was breaking over the city. Emergency vehicles surrounded the building, and Zara could see familiar faces among the crowd. The prisoners they'd rescued, being loaded into ambulances and medical transports. 47 wolves who would have a chance to heal, to rebuild their lives, to be free. It wasn't perfect. Some of them might never fully recover from what had been done to them. The organization still had surviving members scattered across the globe. The war wasn't over. But tonight, they had won something important. Tonight, they had saved lives and struck a blow against true evil. And they had done it together, as partners, as mates, as two people who refused to let darkness win without a fight. Is it over? Kai asked quietly, leaning against her for support as they watched the facility burn. This part is, Zara replied, wrapping her arms around him. But there's still work to do. Together? Always together. The sun continued to rise over London, painting the sky in shades of gold and promise. Somewhere in the crowd of survivors, people were beginning to remember who they used to be before chemicals and conditioning stole their identities. It was a start. It was hope. It was enough. Chapter 12. 6 months later, Zara stood on the balcony of their safe house in the Swiss Alps, watching snow fall across the valley below. The view was peaceful, serene, a far cry from the urban battlefields and underground laboratories that had defined their lives for so long. Behind her, she could hear Kai moving around the kitchen, preparing what had become their morning ritual: coffee, eggs, and a quiet review of intelligence reports from their network of contacts around the world. The organization wasn't dead. Entities that large and well-funded didn't die easily. But it was wounded, scattered, operating from a position of fear rather than strength. 43 of their original 63 targets were confirmed dead, and the survivors had gone so deep underground that they might as well have ceased to exist. More importantly, the rescued prisoners were healing. Some faster than others, but all of them recovering pieces of themselves that they'd thought lost forever. Dr. Zara Kane, one of the wolves they'd saved from the London facility, had even started a support group for conditioning survivors. It was working. Slowly and perfectly, but it was working. Intelligence briefing in 5 minutes, Kai called from inside, his voice carrying the warm intimacy of 6 months spent learning each other's daily rhythms. Zara smiled and headed back into the warmth of their home. Home. When had she started thinking of anywhere as home? When had the idea of staying in one place, building something permanent with another person, stopped terrifying her? She found Kai at the kitchen table, surrounded by files and photographs, but his attention was focused on a different kind of paperwork entirely. Legal documents, official seals, forms printed on expensive paper. "What's all this?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "Our new identities," Kai replied, sliding a passport across to her. Zara and Kai Morrison, married 3 years ago in a small ceremony in Scotland. Clean backgrounds, legitimate employment history, no connections to any supernatural organizations. Zara flipped through the passport, studying the photograph that looked like her but somehow seemed to belong to a completely different person, someone softer, happier, unmarked by years of violence and loss. "Morrison?" she asked with raised eyebrows. "You wanted to keep your initials. I thought it sounded better than Kane." "And the marriage part?" Kai's expression grew suddenly uncertain, vulnerable in a way that still made her heart skip after all this time. "I was hoping you might want to make that real." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, setting it on the table between them with hands that shook slightly. "Zara Kane," he said quietly, "will you marry me? Will you be my partner in whatever comes next, whether that's hunting criminals or raising a family or just learning how to be normal people together?" Zara stared at the box, feeling her world shift in ways that had nothing to do with danger or violence, and everything to do with love and possibility and the future she'd never let herself imagine. "Open it," Kai said softly. Inside the box was a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen. Not a traditional diamond, but something that looked like captured starlight, set in platinum, that had been carved with symbols she recognized as ancient wolf blessing runes. "It's moonstone," Kai explained. "Supposedly it strengthens the bond between mates, protects against separation and loss. I had it made by a witch in Prague who specializes in supernatural jewelry." "It's beautiful," Zara breathed, but she didn't take it from the box. Instead, she looked up at Kai, seeing hope and fear warring in his green eyes. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "After everything we've been through, everything we've seen, are you sure you want normal? Are you sure you want forever with someone like me? Someone like you?" Kai reached across the table to take her hands in his. "You mean someone brave enough to walk into hell for strangers? Someone who kept me sane during the worst period of my life? Someone who makes me want to be better than I ever thought possible? Someone who kills people for a living," Zara said bluntly. "Someone who's made a lot of enemies and might never be able to completely leave the life behind." "We've both killed people, Zara. And we've both saved people. The question isn't whether we're perfect, it's whether we're perfect for each other." Zara looked at the ring again, at the moonstone that seemed to glow with its own inner light, at the man who'd walked through fire with her and emerged stronger on the other side. She thought about the morning 6 months ago when she'd woken up in a safe house, assigned to protect a stranger who'd turned out to be her mate. She'd been so certain then that emotional distance was the only way to survive, that caring too much was a luxury she couldn't afford. Now she couldn't imagine existing without the bond that connected her to Kai, couldn't picture a future that didn't include his quiet strength and unexpected gentleness, and the way he looked at her like she was something precious. "Yes," she said simply. Kai's face lit up like sunrise. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want forever, even if we have no idea what that looks like. Yes to all of it." Kai was around the table and kissing her before she'd finished speaking, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed against his mouth. When he finally set her down, both of them were breathless and grinning like idiots. "When?" he asked, sliding the ring onto her finger with reverent care. "Soon," Zara said, admiring the way the moonstone caught the morning light. But first, we finish the job. Kai's expression grew serious as he remembered the intelligence reports spread across their table. The Munich operation? 3 more targets, plus whatever security they've hired since London. Could be our last major strike against the organization. Could be the mission that finally gets us killed. Could be. Zara shrugged, feeling the familiar weight of her weapons and the comfort of impending action. Or it could be the one that finally ends this war. Kai studied her face, and she knew he was seeing the same contradiction she'd been wrestling with for months, the desire for a normal life warring with the need to see justice done. What if we walked away, he asked quietly. Right now, today. Changed our names, disappeared completely, let someone else finish hunting down the remnants. Zara considered it seriously. Imagine a life where their biggest worry was what to have for dinner or whether the snow would interfere with their satellite internet. It was tempting, seductive in its simplicity, but it wasn't who they were. Not yet, anyway. After Munich, she said firmly. After we know for certain that no one else will suffer what those 47 prisoners suffered. Then we walk away and figure out what normal looks like. Kai nodded slowly, unsurprised by her answer. Partners to the end? Partners to the end. They spent the next hour reviewing the intelligence on their Munich targets, planning what would hopefully be their final operation. 3 more names to cross off their list. 3 more monsters who preyed on innocent wolves. After Munich, they would disappear. After Munich, Zara and Kai Morrison could begin the quiet life that Zara Kane and Kai Rivers had never been allowed to have. But first, they had work to finish. As the sun climbed higher over the Alps, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and rose, Zara felt a peace she'd never experienced before. Not the peace of completion, but the peace of knowing that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. She had a partner, a mate, a future husband who understood that sometimes love meant walking into danger together rather than seeking safety apart. I love you, she said quietly, the words carrying the weight of promise and commitment, and 1,000 shared dangers survived together. I love you too, Kai replied, pulling her close against his chest. Always and forever. Outside their window, the world continued its ancient dance of seasons and renewal. Somewhere in Munich, their enemies were making plans, never knowing that justice was already on its way. But here in their safe house, surrounded by the tools of war and the promise of peace, 2 wolves had found something worth fighting for, worth killing for, worth living for. Each other. Forever was just beginning. 1 year later. The wedding was small, held in a meadow outside their new home in rural Montana. Victor was there, alive, forgiven, and serving as Kai's best man despite everything that had happened. Maria stood as Zara's matron of honor, tears streaming down her face as she watched 2 people who'd earned their happiness the hard way finally claim it. Some of the rescued prisoners attended as well, no longer prisoners but survivors, friends, chosen family who understood the bond forged in shared trauma and mutual salvation. The vows they exchanged were simple, honest, and witnessed by people who knew exactly what those promises meant. To love and cherish, through whatever dangers lay ahead. To fight side by side when the world demanded it, and to find peace together when the battles were finally won. To choose each other, again and again, for as long as they both drew breath. When the ceremony was over and the small reception had wound down, Kai and Zara found themselves alone in their meadow, surrounded by wildflowers and the endless Montana sky. No regrets? Kai asked, echoing the question that had started everything between them. Only that it took us so long to get here. They danced to music only they could hear, while stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled their ancient songs of pack and family and bonds that could never be broken. The organization was finished, its remnants scattered to the winds. The war was over, the innocent were safe, and justice had finally been served. Now, at last, forever could truly begin.